Welcome to Spring 2022 Explore the World, the virtual series from the International Education Office. And today we have two speakers, and we were just talking. One of them, we've never had a presentation on Morocco before, and we've never had a presentation on this location in Peru before. So I'm really excited to hear from our two anthropologists who are speaking today. Welcome to all of you, especially welcome to the gaming students who are joining us. We're so glad you're here, and we hope you get some really creative ideas to incorporate into your classwork. We try to go in alphabetical order, so we are going to start with Morocco and with Erin Gould, who is teaching anthropology at JCCC. Erin lived 3 years in Morocco while she was working on her PhD research. She worked a great deal with youth storytellers, so she'll tell us something about that, but also just about Morocco in general so that we can all vicariously travel there with her. If you haven't muted yourself, and I know I'm in sort of a noisy background, so I'm going to mute myself now and try to remember to unmute later, but please do that. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat at any time, and we'll try to address them at the end. So welcome to Explore the World, Erin.
I'm really excited to be here with all of you to talk about Morocco. And like Jeanette said, I spent 3 years, my name is Erin Gould, by the way. I'm in the anthropology department, as she said. And I spent 3 years living in Morocco. And so I'm really excited to get this opportunity to share with you, especially learning that there have not yet been any presentations on Morocco. And when I was asking Jeanette really about what I should talk about, it merged into this kind of exploration of just a lot of things that I saw there, being able to share a lot of pictures. And so I titled this Morocco Exploration of Cities and Culture just because it's going to be kind of a wide paintbrush of things that I experienced in Morocco and places that I went to get us kind of to a place where we have a general idea of some of the different cities and experiences you could have in Morocco. Also, like she said, I went there doing my PhD research, and so I studied youth storytellers, and I hope in another Explore the World that I'll get to talk more about that. But inherently in what I'm about to tell you, there's going to be a lot of stories and mythology, and so I'm really excited to share with you. So let's go ahead and get started. Just to orient us where Morocco is, I thought I would share a couple of maps. On the left side of the screen, you should see kind of the Google Maps area of Morocco, in the center with Spain right above it. So at its closest point, Morocco is about 7 kilometers away from Spain. So it doesn't take that long to take a ferry from Spain or from Morocco to Spain. And it's separated by the Strait of Gibraltar, which I put as a little arrow in between there. It's been a very strategic place to kind of control over the years. And so it's Morocco and kind of this bottom part of Spain have been kind of moving back and forth between who controls it over a long period of time. Also to the left and to the west, we see the Atlantic Ocean. So just on the other side of the pond from us. As we go to this kind of right map, we'll see more of the topography and so some of the elevation. And you can tell from that map that there's a big mountain range in the center of Morocco, kind of separating it from the larger Sahara Desert. And kind of more of the cities of Morocco are on that western side of the mountain range, closer to the coasts. Just also to kind of give us a chance to think about scale, Morocco is roughly the same size as California and has just as many kind of varieties of environments and kind of territories as well. All right, so like I said at the beginning, this presentation is going to be more of an exploration of things. And when I was talking with a colleague of mine about how I should organize this, they were like, maybe you should talk about just the fact that it's a very diverse place. So like many other places, it's full of diversity of people, people who have lived there before, people who live there now. Languages, again, a lot of different languages are spoken in this country. And that has a lot to do with the history, but also influxes of tourism as well. And so I want to draw your attention to the far left picture with that says flavor of letters to it. in that particular picture, that was taken from an art exhibition at this place called Dar Balaj in Marrakesh, where I was primarily located. And here on this one picture, the reason I want to show it is because it shows the diversity of languages even represented in this one picture. So we have flavor of the letters in English, then we have saveurs or lettres, and that's in French. And then we have the Arabic kind of in the middle, and below on the far bottom right is actually an example of the Tamazight language, which is written in a Tifina script. And this is a language that is used by people who are known as kind of the original inhabitants of Morocco, and they're called the Amazigh group, or Amazigh for singular. So you can already see from this one picture the diversity of languages. During colonization, Morocco was a protectorate of France. It's also colonized by Spain. Lots of German tourists come, so we can see how languages would be very diverse in this country. Also have a lot of foods, as I showed in the last picture of the maps, different environments, and as we go through today, we're going to see differences in all of the cities that I mentioned. So before we get into the cities, I thought it would be fun to just show a bunch of pictures of great food. It's been fun to re-examine and go back to Morocco through kind of preparing this presentation. And so one thing that if you ever go to Morocco, you will have to have, like, no question about it, is something called tagine. And so tagine refers to two different things. If you look at the small picture in the very center, kind of the vessel, this is called a tagine, the actual pot that the meal is made in, but also what is cooked inside the tagine is called a tagine. So on the left side, we have a meat and fig kind of tagine put together. On the far right picture, we have a kefta tagine, which is ground meat in a tomato sauce with egg on top. And then in the bottom kind of right picture, we have another meat and chicken looking tagine with a bunch of vegetables. And so whatever is cooked in a tagine ends up being called a tagine, and you can put anything into it, whatever you have available to you. Definitely, if you go, you have to have it. We also have other foods, though, obviously. There's going to be a lot of things that are delicious when you get to experience another place. Some examples are harira, which means soup in Arabic, but in the area that I lived in, harira usually meant this kind of red soup up in the top left corner. We also have couscous. This is traditionally had for lunch on Fridays. It's made in this really cool dish that actually simultaneously makes couscous and steams all of the vegetables at the same time. And usually there is meat in the middle. So this example has a little bit of beef in the middle, surrounded by couscous and a lot of vegetables. Underneath those two pictures is what is called tangia. And I love talking about tangia because it's actually like a very local Marrakesh thing. And so since I spent the most time in Marrakesh, I feel the most kind of connection with that city. And this is like slow cooked lamb that's cooked underground in these huge pits for like days. And then they put it into another vessel where it continues to cook. And once you actually order it, you get one of these little vessels and they dump it out in front of you and you eat it. It's just meat, but you eat it with bread as shown in that picture at the bottom. It's very delicious. Definitely don't miss it. If anyone has ever heard of David Chang, who's a chef, he actually did an episode of one of his TV shows and went to this, this Tangia place because it's so famous in Marrakesh. We also have juices. Everybody loves juice. Always has kind of fresh fruit on top. There's so many different versions. This juice is from my favorite restaurant for juices called Winu, which means like little cute one in Tamazight. And on the far right, you have a cup of mint tea, which can also come in a small teapot like seen in the Tangia picture. So now we've got a little bit of idea about what some of the foods are that we might encounter. Let's take a journey in Morocco. And so what I've devised here is kind of 6 different stops that I'm going to make, kind of going from the north down to the south and stopping in Marrakesh where I stayed. So let's start in Tangier. Tangier is one of the more northern most cities. It's been known as kind of a cultural capital. A lot of beat poets, a lot of artists, a lot of musicians have ended up in Tangier, and it's was for a long time known as an international city. And so it changed, the control of the city changed over time to different groups, but now it is like governed by Morocco. In the top left picture is Cap Spartel, and this lighthouse is really significant for a few reasons, and one of them being this is a spot that people go to outside of the city to actually see where the Strait of Gibraltar and the Atlantic Ocean meet. So you can kind of see how those currents kind of come up against each other, and it's kind of the significant place of like, okay, we are at this confluence of a lot of different of movement. In the bottom left, you can see another picture of kind of the area of the port. I didn't go from this port, but I went from another port in Tangier to Spain once, and it took about an hour. So it's very, very close. In the middle bottom picture, you see the map, the flag of Morocco, the red with the green star on it, and just another view of a really nice promenade. It has these really huge cannons on it, and you can see the Strait of Gibraltar from there. And the far right picture I put in because I think this is one of these images that after living in Morocco, I saw it so often that it became very commonplace. But it's in this place called the Hercules Caves, which I'll come back to. One of the reasons why it's so well known is that people say that it looks like Africa, because if you flipped that image, you can see where like the Horn of Africa and kind of the Western Africa kind of juts out. And also there's a tiny little Madagascar almost shaped outlet on the cave as well. And so you'll actually see this in the north a lot as people having it as bumper stickers and just kind of showing how everyday it is for this place to be kind of mentioned. But it's also known as the Hercules Caves because, according to mythology, Hercules traveled throughout North Africa, and based on those stories, people claim that Hercules must have stayed in these caves when he was hiding out from some of his 13 labors. One of the other labors, they say, actually also took place outside of the caves where he was supposed to find the 3 golden apples. So if you ever take a tour of Tangier, there's all these kinds of mythological stories also enmeshed in kind of everyday life. All right, so let's go a little bit further south from Tangier into Chefchaouen. So Tangier was this coastal city. We saw it was very pretty on the water. If we go south to Chefchaouen, we are now clearly enmeshed into kind of the forested region of the north. And this is within the Rif Mountains, so the northernmost mountain range. We can see here, it's a very pretty place. It's also known as the Blue City. It may or may not, don't quote me, be one of the most visited cities in Morocco just because people love taking pictures with the blue walls. As you can see from the far right picture, all of the walls in Chefchaouen are painted this beautiful blue. And so people try to play with that color by having these colorful plant pots, also putting their wares outside. So kind of contrast with the very pretty blue. It's a really beautiful place to visit. But if you don't like to take a bus through mountains, you may never make it because that's one of the only ways you can get there, or by car. All right, so Blue Pearl, Blue City, great place to visit. Let's now move south. So let's go to Fez. If you can kind of see in that smaller Google map I have up in the top left corner, you'll see that we've now kind of left the major green place on the map, and we're getting to this more brown, kind of more desert-like area. In the center of this image, or this slide, you can see the Blue Gate. The Blue Gate is this very huge gate to the old Medina. If you can't tell, the color on the gate is blue, which gives it its name. And this is just the main entryway to get to kind of the markets and kind of the different areas to stay in the city. If you look directly to the right of that picture, that's kind of a picture of the entry into that gate. So there's lots of restaurants. People are like walking around and buying things, and very small on that table at the restaurant, you can see the lid of a tagine. Also really important to note that these gates are seen throughout Moroccan cities. Lots of times they would be opened or shut if it was a walled city. So this was actually used as an entry into the city. And you can see how those kinds of imagery would be used in contemporary buildings like the train station of Fez directly below the Blue Gate. It's kind of mimicking these same kind of architectural structures in a very new structure. If you move to the left, where all those vats of things are, we can see the tanneries of Fez. So this is where leather gets worked and dyed and created into beautiful coats and everything else. It does smell very bad there. So usually when you're walking around, people will give you a little sprig of mint, but it's amazing that you can kind of walk on a pathway and see these tanneries working today. And if you go right above the tanneries, you can see a view of a very kind of brown area. This is what it looks like outside of the city. So as you can tell, again, we're outside of this kind of green area, and now we're looking at kind of a brown, like more desert-like location. Fez is also known as one of the cultural capitals of Morocco, which is why it's so interesting and why people talk about it a lot. It still holds a lot of different festivals, also has the huge tanneries, but it also is a very significant place for storytelling, even though storytelling doesn't happen there in public anymore. So let's leave Fez, and we're on the route to Rabat, but we're going to make a quick pit stop to Ouelili or Volubilis. This is an area of Roman ruins that's just outside of a city called Meknes. Meknes, one of the signs for Meknes is seen in the bottom right of this slide, but Ouelili is this place that people go and visit every time they go to Meknes. It's really significant. It's really well known throughout Morocco. And this is just another way that we can see how many different people traverse this landscape. So up in the top right of this slide, you'll see a map from that specific place at Ouelili, where Romans kind of conquered and lived in different places. And you can see at the very kind of far left of that picture is kind of where Morocco is. And so we can see how Romans went all over and left kind of remnants of themselves in places like outside of Fez. So let's continue on our road. And now we've reached Rabat. This is the capital. It's on the ocean. So we're back on the Atlantic Ocean. And if you can see from the far right side of the slide, there's a big avenue and kind of more European style buildings. Rabat is the capital. There is a small old city, like a small Medina in Rabat, but a lot of it is actually very European. And that's because it was kind of became the capital after the French created a protectorate there. So we can see these big avenues influenced by French architecture, and also see kind of the influences not only within how people live, but within this architecture that the French have had in this area. In Rabat, it's not uncommon to speak a lot of French because the administration is there, and a lot of administrative paperwork or events happen in French because it's kind of still seen with prestige. Morocco, just for a fun fact for you, is a constitutional monarchy. So while Rabat is the capital, the king has palaces in a lot of different cities where he'll live, but this is where parliament is. They have a constitution there. The Moroccan king is still very much active in making decisions, but he does have a parliament that helps influence or put input into these decisions. We can also see public art is really prevalent throughout Rabat. There's a really famous art museum there. And at the top of this slide in the center, you can see one area of public art that was actually inspired by public art and museum kind of confluence. So there was a piece in the museum that looked like this, and the artist was then commissioned to do that piece also in the city. As you can see from the far left of the picture, we're back on the coast. There's a lighthouse, and in the middle of this slide at the bottom is the Hassan Tower. This is a really famous location because it's the unfinished beginnings of what would have potentially been a huge mosque in Rabat. And the Hassan Tower is actually the start of the minaret, which is where the call to prayer would have come from. So it's technically not finished and hasn't been finished. It was started in the 1300s and probably will never be finished. It's a very interesting place to visit. So let's go from the capital down to Essaouira. This is another coastal town, but it's much smaller. Yes, on the left side of the slide, you see a camel. This is a little stop off before you get to the city, and kind of one of those iconic, like, people get out who are local or tourists and kind of look over to see Essaouira, which you can see in the back left of that picture, that white city. Within the city, things are being sold. There's lots of fish markets because they're right on the port. And also on the right side of the slide, you can see kind of this structure on the port. These structures are actually very Portuguese in kind of their reference, because a lot of coastal cities starting in the 1500s on the coast of Morocco were heavily influenced by the Portuguese. So this is a kind of an example of one of those Portuguese type structures that are still existing on the outskirts of Essaouira. And for anyone who loves pop culture, this place was also featured in Game of Thrones. There's a couple of different locations in Essaouira, the city, that were actually used during filming. Okay, so now we've gotten to my place, Marrakesh. This is my favorite location. Just, you know, I feel the most belonging there, and I love the city, and I've gotten to know it over the time that I've lived there. Before we dig into Marrakesh, I thought it would be interesting to see how landscape plays into the area around the city. So if you go southeast of Marrakesh, you can find this place called Ourika, which is a very famous place for waterfalls. It notoriously has a waterfall that has 7 different levels. So people try to hike up all 7. I've heard it's a very difficult climb. I've never gone past the first. But it's a really beautiful kind of oasis town, lots of water coming off of the mountain. Here we see, again, a tagine picture. Food is amazing. And at the top of the screen, you can see one of the signs that leads from Marrakesh to Ourika. At the very top, you see Ourika and Oukhamden in both Latin kind of transliterated letters and Arabic. I love street signs in Morocco. I think it's so helpful to have kind of pictures with words. So I wanted to show an example of that. However, if we go southwest of Marrakesh, we can go to something called the Agafay Desert. As you can see from here, there's not a lot going on. It's very rocky. It does not look anything like those waterfalls that we were just seeing. So we can see how kind of varied these landscapes could be. This variation continues within most cities in Morocco, but specifically we'll talk here about Marrakesh, because on the right side of the slide, kind of my one circle, I've circled the old city, or what we call the Medina. And on the left side is what is called the new city, or Ville Nouvelle. The new city is actually kind of these remnants of when the French came and colonized Morocco. The way that the new city is organized in terms of streets and infrastructure and buildings types is much different than the old city. It's much more those broad boulevards, kind of thinking about more French and European influenced style architecture. Whereas the old city is kind of those winding, smaller roads that you can see probably in more depictions of what you think of as Morocco. So what I thought I would end kind of this presentation by walking you from the new city to the old city, and that kind of letting you ponder all of these things that I've put together for you today. So on this first slide, we see kind of a picture of one of the main avenues in the new city. And just for fun, a couple of different art pieces that are in what is called the art garden on the bottom left and top kind of center right. Those 2 pieces are in what we call the art garden. It was inspired by the COP22 meeting, the Council of Participants 22 that was held in Marrakesh, all about climate change. The top left picture and bottom right picture, however, are kind of this confluence of kind of more traditional types of performance within the new city. And actually, these are two pictures from a very famous festival that happens. It was my original dissertation project, but it stopped being held for a few years, so I switched my dissertation to storytelling. So as these participants continue walking down this big boulevard, they end up at the Palais Badi. You can see in the bottom right picture is actually them kind of coming out through the palace there and people waiting to see the different performances. The Palais Badi is also a really interesting place because it's a huge palace complex in Marrakesh that is in the middle of a desert, but during its heyday, it had these big kind of citrus fields that are citrus gardens that are seen here and huge fountains. And so up in the top left of the picture, you can see some of the remnants of kind of these aqueducts that were built to bring in water from the outskirts of the city. Okay, now I just want to walk you into the Medina. So we've left the Palais Badi and we're in different streets and kind of thinking about what could be for sale. So we have the bottom left, kind of different figs and nuts and other ideas or other things for snacks. On the right, you have things like dyes and different colored petals for decoration. And in the middle, we're going to continue down kind of the alleyway to see these confluence of kind of traditional arts and more contemporary kind of mural art that has been created all within this Medina space. So we have this kind of conflation and confluence of a lot of different elements and different styles coming all together in this old city. And where I want to end, because I know I need to end soon, is at Jemaa el-Fnaa Square. And this is the famous place where storytelling would happen. So it is inevitable that I was going to show it to you at some point because of my research. The two bottom pictures show you kind of the space of Jemaa el-Fnaa Square. And this is the place where a lot of performances happen, a lot of things are being sold, and one of the most famous tourist attractions in Marrakesh. This is where storytellers would have been. This is where monkey handlers will try to put their monkeys onto you. There's where snake charmers, ganawa musicians, other musicians, henna artists, all of these are kind of at this confluence, and Jemaa el-Fnaa Square is also known as kind of the heart of the city. And the last thing I wanted to mention is I've been talking a lot about this historical place. This is where people would have performed or they do perform. And it is still a place of performance. People are still there every day doing what they would like to do, what they're performing. And also during that COP22 time in 2016, people actually staged a flash mob there. So kind of bringing together these more historic types of performance that we would see and that have been seen for a long time there with these new styles of kind of gathering people together in this heart of the city. So that's all for me. Sorry if I went a little long, Jeanette, but thank you for listening.
Well, thanks so much, Erin. That's fascinating. I'm really, really hungry now. I'm going to go have some of that tagine. That looked delicious. And just Morocco, the old and the new, and the civilizations together. So thanks for that. And if you have questions, hopefully we'll have time at the end. Otherwise, Erin has already promised to tell us some more at a later date, so we'll hold her to that. And secondly, we're going to talk about Peru, but not the parts of Peru that you've probably immediately thought of, Cusco or Lima. We're going to talk about the archaeological and natural heritage of the Pomac Forest Historic Sanctuary in Peru. And our speaker is going to be Kaylee Sharp, who also is in the anthropology department. And we so appreciate you zooming in today and telling us about this region. And I think you told me you have been there at least over 10 years, if I'm remembering right. So correct my length of time and welcome to Explore the World.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for inviting me here today. I am delighted to share my projects with you, and hopefully what will transition very neatly into a study abroad program next year. So I'm just going to quickly share with you where we are on the planet. So here we are at JCCC. I'm actually a little bit more over here in Southern Illinois, where I'm coming to you today. I am an archaeologist, an anthropological archaeologist. I am an adjunct teacher here at JCCC in the Department of Anthropology. And this is where I did my research on the north coast of Peru, my dissertation research. So if you can imagine, we're a little bit closer to the equator than where we are normally when we think about our visits to Peru. So I just wanted to give you that kind of context here this afternoon. When we think about Machu Picchu and we normally think of Peru, we're really much further south on the planet. And so the area that I've actually been working in for the past almost 2 decades, as a matter of fact. My first fieldwork was conducted here in Trujillo and at the museum there. And of course, I moved to the far north coast in 2008 as a member of the SICON Archaeology Project. So just to give you a little spatial contextualization there before I hop into my presentation this morning. So I have been working on the north coast of Peru, as I mentioned, since 2004. I started working in Trujillo, and I was studying a group called the Moche culture. And then I gradually found my way a bit further north in 2008, where I fell in love with the diversity on the north coast and the incredible environmental and cultural situation that is present there. So again, we're just south of the equator. So what that means is when I'm doing my field work in the summer in North America, it's actually winter in Peru, which is actually very pleasant if you can imagine life near the equator. It's certainly a land of extremes. And when we think of Peru, we're often thinking of Machu Picchu, we're thinking of Amazonia and the Amazon rainforests. They are right across the Andean mountain range, the Central Andes and the Andean Cordillera. And I have actually never been to the Amazon. So I would love to go. I would love to experience that environment one day. So far, I haven't been there, but I've pretty much been every place else in Peru. So again, we're talking about a land of incredible environmental extremes. Machu Picchu is in, of course, the Sacred Valley and in the highlands of Peru. And that landscape, again, is phenomenal. I just had the opportunity to visit there in November of 21, which was just fantastic, and filmed some new ethnographic footage that some of my students have already started benefiting from. And I'll be sharing more with you guys. So hang in there. You'll get to see some more exciting footage from that trip as well. And of course, we were talking right before the presentation started today. A lot of domesticated animals that we are really quite familiar with, domesticated plants and animals that we know about that are actually very much a part of our lives today here in North America, actually were first domesticated in Peru. So the Muscovy duck that you're looking at, the llamas and alpacas that we know for their wonderful fiber, and of course, guinea pigs who unfortunately in Peru are not our pets and our friends as much as they are a delicacy that you will eat on the weekends or for special occasions. And then, of course, maize, chili pepper, and the omnipresent potato, of which there are hundreds, over 100 varieties in Peru, and we only have 4 here in the US. So if you can imagine, it's a remarkable difference. And of course, as we heard about last time Peru was discussed, fruits and vegetables, but primarily fruits and produce, are incredible on the coast and in the highlands. So some of my favorites I took a picture of here, the chirimoya and the granadilla that are pictured in the center. Highly recommended. You can't leave Peru without trying them at least once. Quite a unique experience as well. And of course, a part of that extreme diversity that is omnipresent on the coast and on the highlands are, of course, related to water and climate change. And of course, drought and El Nino flooding have been around since several thousand years ago in prehistory, and of course are still figuring prominently in the cities and in the lifestyle of Peru today. Now, one thing that's unique about the way the study abroad experience and my experience when I take students with me to Peru is that while it is an amazing place to visit and to tour and to experience just as a very informal level, I like to contextualize those experiences for my students and really approach each of these unique environments and these unique settings in a way that sort of cultivates this critical inquiry. So today I'm going to, kind of continue in that line of thinking and hopefully inspire you for what comes next. So when we're thinking about life on the coast, there's definitely a strong connection, past, present, and I hope, hopefully, how we will transform and work with these very fragile environments in the future. So iconographically, we know about fishing on the coast. We know about the products and the technologies that ancient people were using a little over 1,000 years ago, about 1,500 years ago. And certainly we have modern correlates that tell us that these people weren't just making it up, that these were really documents for lifeways and things that were happening in the past. One thing that makes that really important in South America and Peru and in a lot of locations around the world is that ancient Peruvians never developed a writing system as we know it. So when we can make those kinds of connections between the archaeological past and the contemporary setting of today, it's really quite profound. So when I'm spending time on the coast, I love fresh seafood. And so that connection is pretty powerful and strong for me as well. And what you will see here are the same reed boats that we just saw iconographically in the quick depiction that I showed you. One thing that you will also notice, and if I have any students here, I might be giving something away, but the reason that it's really interesting to watch the fishermen coming in and displaying their fish on their reed boats is the sexual division of labor that we see that likely has some connection to what was happening thousands of years ago. Women are the fishmongers. And so while the men go out and do the fishing, the women display the fish for sale on the beach and then bring them into the local market. So that's why you will see this young lady with her crab, which is very much alive, who is working in the fish market. So a little tidbit there that you don't think about when you go to the market and you're experiencing this sort of contemporary life experience, that there's really that connection to the prehistoric past. The same is true of the highlands, and something that recently factors of migration, globalization, economy, global economy, and new companies coming to the coast and encouraging wineries and new cultivates, are that a lot of people who lived in the highlands and had limited contact with the coast have actually moved into the cities. And what that means is that preserving traditional lifeways is much more difficult than it was, but it also leads to a much more exciting and dynamic interaction between the coast and highlands. So when we visit the highlands and this town of Inkawasi, which is not too far from the coast, again, that kind of environmental extremes. We're at about a little over 10,000 feet. So we have that highland environment. We've got the llamas and alpacas. Today, some of the changes that have occurred are the result of sort of shifting practices of animal husbandry. So instead of the llamas and alpacas of the past, we will see sheep and, of course, native cotton. That is an item that is used in weaving. So again, weaving is something that we know prehistorically, iconographically, from over 1,000 years ago. And it's certainly very much alive today and is a part of not only cultural traditions and traditions that are being passed on and hopefully preserved today as they were in the past, but also a component of this highland identity. And for this community known as Inkawasi, which is about 4 hours away from my home base in Chiclayo, is actually that these communities also speak a northern dialect of Quechua, which was the language of the Inca, and which has only recently been written down and forms a part of this unique cultural heritage of the highlands that really is overlooked when we think about Cusco and the highlands in the south. These small communities like Inkawasi are really doing a lot of things in a very similar way, but also very unique to them and their environments as well. And of course, we cannot talk about Peru without talking about its colonial heritage and the transitions and that component of life that is very much alive and well in various forms on the North Coast as well. Trujillo is the southernmost point that we travel when we're thinking of this study abroad experience. It is also a beautiful colonial gem that was the locus of independence and where the independence from Spain was actually proclaimed for the North, happened in Trujillo, the Casa de la Emancipación there, which is right on the colonial square. And that actually happened very recently in 1820. So when we visit Trujillo, there's remarkable archaeology, there's a remarkable connection to the past, and of course, that colonial Spanish heritage, which of course, the Castilian language, Castellano, which is, spoken, the Spanish that is spoken in Peru, are certainly residual evidence of that as well. And of course, the icing on the cake, so to speak, is the Bosque de Pomac and the Sican site. So I am a member of the Sican Archaeology Project since 2008. This is the longest running archaeology project in Peru. It's actually been ongoing for the past 47 years. If you can imagine, this is the landscape. It's a completely unique landscape in Peru, one of 4 cultural natural preserves in Peru. It's a protected area, and it is ecologically and culturally unique in Peru and in South America, and more or less throughout the world, depending on how you define that level of uniqueness. In this image, what you are seeing in the background are man-made or person-made flat-top pyramids soaring above this dry thorn scrub forest that doesn't have a lot of water throughout the year, but is pretty close to the coast. Here's an aerial view of another pyramid that is located in the forest. And of course, one of the wonderful vessels that pertain to the Sican culture that existed in this area and dominated this area from about 800 to 1375 AD. And of course, in addition to being a remarkable opportunity to visit the diverse landscapes that are contained in this very small area, the study abroad program, as I envision it, is also part of a service learning project that has been ongoing since 2018. I visited with a colleague. We had a small grant to begin working with archaeological objects to create lesson plans for K through 12 and undergraduate students, so first and second year students as well. And so the reason that's really important, and perhaps the most important part of this project, is that the local community does claim ancestral heritage to the people that were living in those pyramids and in that incredible dry thorn scrub forest known as Bosque de Pomac, or the Pomac forest. And so to be able to bring that part of their heritage and their history to life is really just empowering, not only for the researchers, but for the local communities as well. Most recently, and I'm going to try to shut the volume off here, I was in the Sican National Museum, which is our home base, working with some of the materials to start revamping some of the old exhibits and convert them into virtual exhibits that we can share around the world, and to also preserve this heritage and kind of update everything that's happening there. So I am so excited that we have students from animation and design with us today, because this is certainly a part of what you're doing as well, and a different way of using all of those wonderful techniques that you're learning about. And this gold mask, which is covered in cinnabar, is actually a 3D model that hasn't been released to the public yet. So you are the first folks that are getting to view the model. I can't show you the dynamic version, but just know that that's a part of our revised and revamped exhibits. There are just some images of what it looked like coming out of the ground, what it looked like restored, and then the three-dimensional model that I just showed you. Also, that mask was found on an individual that was buried upside down. There's a much longer, much more exciting story to share there as well, but I will wait until you visit me at the Sircon Museum. Either when we get to travel as part of study abroad, or if you have the opportunity to visit yourself. So thank you so much for your attention today and for letting me share this exciting project with you.
Wow, that last picture with the bougainvillea, that is beautiful. And thanks so much for taking us to this area that you know really well and that most of us don't know anything about. So now we can all go do some of our own research and hopefully maybe travel there ourselves with the study abroad trip. So we have just a few more minutes left. Does anybody from the audience have any questions? If you do, feel free to unmute yourself and just speak up. Oh, John does. So go ahead, John.
Sorry, I was just giving a thumbs up to the presentation there. Very fascinating. And I will ask this question with the locals in the area where you're doing the research. What was the most common language spoken at home?
And John, are we talking about Morocco or Peru?
Peru there.
In Ferreñafe and in Chiclayo, I have bilingual Spanish, English, and Spanish speakers at home. When we're working in the Highlands and we're up at Incahuasi, Quechua, Spanish bilingual.
Thanks. Yeah, I was wondering about that. It's been my experience in Peru. When you get into the Highlands, it's still, there's a lot of Quechua still.
A lot of Quechua.
Any other questions?
Well, I was just wondering, did she go to Machu Picchu and Lake Titicaca, or did she just stay where she was?
So I recently came back from the Highlands. I was in Cusco and in the Sacred Valley. I have not had the opportunity to go to Lake Titicaca.
I could not either. It was too hard for my husband. So, but I did go to Machu Picchu.
It's remarkable. And when I was just there, there was a double mask mandate. So if you can imagine hiking at Machu Picchu with a double mask, it was quite an arduous adventure.
Oh my God! Yes,
it was. Not highly recommended, but
I'm a history major, so I was very happy to go there. Yeah.
Nan, you had a question.
I did for Erin. I was just wondering, you know, we hear different things about different places and safety, and it's, in my experience, I always feel safer in those places that we hear are unsafe. Was that your experience too? Did you feel safe in Morocco?
So that's a great question. One of the things I didn't get to mention, but is of high importance to think about Morocco, is one of their major industries is actually tourism. And so they do a lot to try to protect people that come in who are foreigners. And it's really uncommon when things happen to foreigners in the country. And that's partially because of things that like the government sets down, also kind of like locally enforced, because people who are working in the workforce need this influx of tourists. It's been kind of something in a lot of the news around the pandemic, because Morocco closed its borders for a long time, opened them back up, but closed them again, and just opened again in February on the 7th. And so it's a lot of things that the government does is to protect kind of the foreigners so that people will continue to come. And so I felt very safe. Like, I feel like it was as safe as I felt in any other city while I lived there. So I think as in most cities, you have kind of like iffy situations that you can find yourself in, but no more so than if I was in Los Angeles or New York or something like that. So I did feel very safe.
Years ago, the college's international insurance company handed out or had available city-specific instructions and guidelines. So I looked up the city-specific instructions for Kansas City. And I learned that according to our insurance company, a person should never, ever, ever under any time go east of Troost. And in fact, even in the downtown, only go during daylight hours. And there is a dangerous disease in the soil here. So try to avoid contact with the soil. And, after I read all of that, I realized that, risk and safety, those are all very relative. So something to think about as you're getting ready to travel. Well, we do have people needing to run and go. We also have lost our students now. Their class ended and they had to vacate their room because another class was coming in. So I just want to thank our two speakers today. This was a fantastic presentation. And we have one more event. We're only doing 2 this spring. The second one is April 13. It's going to be India and Finland, Denmark. And those travelers have actually not yet traveled. They're going over spring break. John Hardy, who's here, is going to be one of the presenters. So even they don't know what they're going to say yet, but you are welcome back to explore the world.